In this video, we're going to review various methods you can use to find the missing angles in triangles and four-sided shapes. So, two very important facts that we need to keep in mind as we solve these problems. The first is that the sum of all three angles in a triangle will always equal 180 degrees. That means if we know two of the angles, we can find the third through subtraction. In a similar fashion, the sum of all four angles in a four-sided figure, these are all four-sided figures, a square, a rectangle, a parallelogram, a trapezoid. The sum of each of those angles adds up to 360 degrees. So keeping those in mind, let's move forward and do a few examples. In this problem, we're asked, what is the measure of angle A? So you can see down below, we have a triangle. It's labeled A, B, C, and we know two of the angles. So the key fact that we need to use to solve this problem is that the angles of a triangle total 180 degrees. That means we can start out with 180 and subtract the two angles that we know. Subtract 60, we subtract 80, that leaves us with 40 degrees. This angle must be 40 degrees. And we could check that by adding these all up and making sure that we get 180, which we do. Let's move on to a similar kind of problem with a four-sided figure. What is the measure of angle C? So when they refer to angle C, we're talking about this corner. And we can see that we know angle B is 81. We know angle D is 77. What about angle A? Well, there's another fact that we need to take into account here. The first fact that we're going to use is that four-sided figures, the angles total 360 degrees. But a square in the corner means that the angle is 90 degrees. It's sort of a shortcut notation so that we can communicate that that's 90 degrees. So now you can see that we know three of the four angles. So we can do the same thing we did with the triangle. We start out with 360 and we start subtracting 81 and 90. It doesn't matter which order we subtract these in. And we get 112 degrees are left over. That means that this must be 112, and there is our answer, B. So very similar to the triangle, but we just had to use 360 degrees. All right, this one's a little bit different. Find angles A, B, and C. What facts do we need to solve this one? Once again, we want to keep in mind that angles total 180 degrees in a triangle. But we also need to know that when three sides of a triangle are equal, that makes something called an equilateral triangle. It means that the angles are also equal. All of these angles are the same. This angle and this angle and this angle are equal. And if they all have to be equal and they all have to add up to 180, we can just divide 180 by 3. And those must be 60-degree angles. And that's always true of an equilateral triangle, that the angles will be 60 degrees. It doesn't matter what size it is. All right, let's move on to the next question. If the measure of angle B is 65 degrees, what is the measure of angle C? The key facts that we need, of course, the first one, angles in a triangle must total 180 degrees. But the second one is really important. When there's two equal sides to a triangle, this is called an isosceles triangle. It means that there are two equal angles. And it's going to be the angles that look like they should be equal. it's this angle and this angle in this triangle, we can see that angle A is different. So going back to the question that was asked, if the measure of angle B is 65 degrees, what's the measure of angle C? Well, it's also 65 degrees. Now let's imagine that this question also asked us for the angle A. We could find angle A because we could say now that, well, the total is 180. I'm going to subtract angle B, which is 65. I'm going to subtract angle C, which is also 65. And that's going to leave me with 30 degrees. So with an isosceles triangle, if you're given one of the angles, you can figure out the other two angles because you know that two of the angles are equal. Next question. The opposite sides of the shape below are parallel and angle A is 70 degrees. What is the measure of angle B? Once again, our letters are referring to the corners. The key facts that we're going to use to solve this: four-sided figures, the angles total 360 degrees. So we know that the sum of A, B, C, and D angles will be 360. Now, with a parallelogram, and that's what this shape is, it's a pushed over rectangle where the angles are not 90 degrees in the corners. The opposite angles of a parallelogram are the same, are equal. So that means that if A is 70 degrees, then C is 70 degrees. And we're trying to find angles B and D, or actually just angle B. But once we know angle B, we will know angle D. So this is a little bit trickier. We need to take 2 steps to solve this problem. We're going to start with 360 and subtract 70 and subtract another 70, because that's going to give us the angles that are left over, or the degrees that are left over between B and D. That's 220 degrees. Now, if we know that B and D are equal and that they total 220 degrees, then we just have to divide by 2. 220 divided by 2 is 110 degrees. 110, and angle D is also 110, and we could add these all up and make sure that they equal 360, and they do. And here is our answer over here, B, 110. Last problem. This problem requires a little bit of algebra. So we're told that angle P is twice angle Q. It's twice as big as angle Q. What is the measure of angle Q? So what do we need to use? We have a 4-sided figure, so we want to keep in mind that the angles will total 360 degrees. The squares in the corner mean those angles are 90 degrees. And finally, that we will need to use some algebra or perhaps guess and check to find the missing angle. So I'm going to use guess and check in this case, but I'm going to start out by noting that this is 90 degrees and this is 90 degrees. So we start out with 360, we subtract 90, we subtract another 90, and we're left with 180 degrees. So that means that angles P and Q must add up to 180 degrees. So if angle Q is 30, answer A, that means that angle P would be what? Angle P is twice angle Q. So that means angle P would be 60. Do 30 and 60 add up to 180? They don't. So that answer doesn't make sense. How about 45? If Q is 45, then P is 90, that adds up to 135. So that's not true. How about C, 60? That means that P would be twice 60, 120. 60 plus 120 gives us 180. So answer C must be our answer. P is 60, Q is 120. Now, we could have used algebra, as I mentioned, but I think that guess and check is probably an easier way to figure out that problem. So I hope that helps refresh your memory on these kind of problems. It's time for some practice. Good luck.